The phone rang at 2:47 a.m. in the morning. At 67 years old, you know that nothing good comes from calls at that hour. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was 412, Pittsburgh. Something made me reach for it in the darkness of my bedroom. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something else. I answered, and a voice on the other end said my name. Ella. Is this Ella? The voice was rough, uncertain, like someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Who is this? I asked. There was breathing on the other end. Heavy. Labored. Then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. It's me. It's Sharon. I just figured out who I am. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up again. This isn't funny, I said when I finally got the phone back to my ear. Whoever you are, this is sick. My sister died 42 years ago. I identified her body myself. I know, the voice said. I know how long it's been. I only just found a newspaper. From 1983. There's a picture of a girl who looks like me, and the name underneath says Sharon Marie Callahan. That's me, isn't it? I'm Sharon Callahan. The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe. My sister Sharon died on December 18th, 1983. She was 21 years old. Her car went off the Pine Valley Bridge during an ice storm. I was 25, and I had to go to the county morgue to identify her body. I had to tell our mother that her youngest daughter was gone. I buried my sister 42 years ago. We had a funeral, we had a gravestone. I visited that grave every year on the anniversary of her death, and now someone was on the phone telling me they were Sharon. Where are you? I managed to say. My voice didn't sound like my own. A place called McKee's Rocks, the voice said. Someone told me that's what it's called. I've been here a long time, I think. I live in a shelter on Chartier's Avenue, but I don't remember how I got here. I don't remember anything before about 20 years ago. Just waking up in a hospital, and they said I'd been found on the street, and I didn't have any ID, and I couldn't tell them my name. My mind was racing through every possibility. This had to be a scam. Someone who'd found Sharon's name in an old newspaper and decided to torture me with it. Someone who wanted money or attention or something else I couldn't understand. But something in that voice made me pause. Something that sounded like genuine confusion, genuine pain. What do you remember? I asked, testing her. Tell me anything you remember. Nothing clear, she said. Just feelings. Sometimes I dream about ice, about being cold, about screaming, and sometimes I dream about a yellow kitchen. Someone used to braid my hair every morning before school. She hummed while she did it, always the same song. I felt the tears start then, hot and sudden, because I remembered that yellow kitchen. I remembered braiding Sharon's hair every single morning before the school bus came. The song I hummed was You Are My Sunshine. It was our mother's favorite song. She used to sing it to us when we were little, and I'd carried on the tradition with Sharon. Every morning, she'd sit on the kitchen stool, and I'd braid her long dark hair, and I'd hum that song without even thinking about it. Nobody knew that. We'd never talked about it outside our family. It was just something we did, something so ordinary and small that it never came up in conversation. How could this person on the phone know that? I need to ask you something, I said, and my voice was shaking. This is important. Do you have any scars or birthmarks? Anything distinctive? There was a long pause. I have a birthmark, she said finally. On my right shoulder blade. It's shaped like a bean, or maybe a comma. I can't really see it myself, but I felt it. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. Sharon had a birthmark on her right shoulder blade, shaped exactly like that. Our mother used to call it her angel kiss when Sharon was little. She'd kiss it every night before bed and say that's where her guardian angel had touched her. I hadn't thought about that in decades. The memories were coming back now, flooding back, and I couldn't stop them. Tell me where you are again, I said. Right now, give me the exact address, the Sister Mary shelter, she said. 447 Chartiers Avenue, McKee's Rocks, Pennsylvania. I'm here most nights, they know me here. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely write it down, but I managed to scratch the address on the notepad I kept by my bed. Stay there, I said. Don't go anywhere. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. That's about a 3-hour drive. I'm leaving right now. Do you understand me? Don't leave that shelter. Okay, she said softly. Okay, Ella, I'll wait for you. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, holding the phone, trying to process what had just happened. My husband Robert stirred in the bed next to me. Ella, what's wrong? He asked. What time is it? I have to go to Pittsburgh, I said. Right now. At 3 a.m? Ella, what's happened? I looked at him. This man I'd been married to for 41 years, and I didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell someone that your sister, who's been dead for 42 years, just called you on the phone? Robert got up and turned on the bedside lamp. He looked at my face and didn't ask any more questions. He just started getting dressed. I'm driving, he said. You're in no state. He was right. I was shaking so hard I could barely button my shirt. We were on the road within 20 minutes, heading east on I-70 toward Pittsburgh. Robert didn't push me for details. He just drove while I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the darkness, trying to make sense of the impossible. What I discovered in the next 7 days would destroy everything I thought I knew about my sister's death. It would force me to confront a mistake I made 42 years ago. A mistake that had consequences I never could have imagined. And it would reveal a truth about what happened to Sharon that would make me question everything I thought I understood about that night in December 1983. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what comes next in this story will challenge everything you think you know about loss, identity, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive grief. If you don't subscribe now, you might miss the moment when everything I thought I knew gets turned completely upside down. And trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Robert kept his eyes on the road as I sat there trying to remember every detail of that December morning in 1983 when I went to the morgue. I'd been so sure. The police had Sharon's purse. They had her driver's license. The car pulled from Chartier's Creek was registered in her name. The body was wearing her coat, her boots, her jewelry. There was a ring on the left hand, a small silver ring with a turquoise stone that I'd given Sharon for her 18th birthday. I remembered looking at that ring on the cold, pale hand and thinking, that's Sharon's ring, that's proof. But now I was wondering if I'd really looked at the face. Really looked. The morgue attendant had warned me before pulling back the sheet. There's significant trauma, he'd said. The face is swollen, there's bruising and lacerations from the impact. The body was in the water for several hours before recovery. Are you sure you want to do this? I'd said yes, because I was the oldest, because Mom couldn't handle it, because someone had to. I thought about the funeral 5 days later, December 23rd, 1983, 2 days before Christmas. We'd had a closed casket because the funeral director said it would be better that way. Better for the family to remember her as she was, he'd said. At the time, I'd been grateful. I didn't want Mom to see Sharon like that, broken and cold. But now I was thinking about that closed casket differently. What if the person inside wasn't Sharon at all? What if I'd been so overwhelmed by grief and shock that I'd identified the wrong person? The thought made me feel sick. If this woman on the phone really was Sharon, then I'd made a mistake that cost my sister 42 years of her life. 42 years of suffering and confusion while we buried someone else under her name. While Mom mourned the wrong daughter. While I moved on with my life, thinking Sharon was gone. Robert reached over and took my hand. Whatever this is, we'll handle it together, he said. I nodded but couldn't speak. My daughter Jennifer called my phone around 5 a.m. Mom, I'm getting on the first flight to Pittsburgh, she said. I should be there by noon. You shouldn't do this alone. I told her we'd meet her at the airport, but the truth was, I needed to see this woman first. I needed to know if this was real or if someone was playing a cruel game. We crossed into Pennsylvania just as the sun was starting to rise. The highway was mostly empty, just a few trucks and early morning commuters. I kept thinking about that voice on the phone, the way she'd said my name, Ella. Like she remembered me, like she'd been waiting 42 years to say it again. But could memory survive that long without any reinforcement? Could someone forget their entire life and then suddenly remember pieces of it from a single newspaper photograph? I'd read about amnesia before. After Sharon's accident, I'd actually researched it, wondering if there was any chance she could have survived with memory loss. But the articles all said the same thing. True amnesia, the kind where you forget your entire identity, is incredibly rare. It usually doesn't last for decades. People recover their memories within days or weeks, sometimes months. Not 20 years, not 42 years. And yet this woman knew things. She knew about the yellow kitchen. She knew about someone braiding her hair and humming. She knew about the birthmark. Those weren't things you could find in a newspaper article or an obituary. Those were intimate family details, the kind of things that only Sharon would know, unless she'd talked to someone who knew us back then. Unless this was an elaborate con. But who would do that? And why? What would anyone have to gain from pretending to be my dead sister after 42 years? We pulled into McKee's Rocks just before 7 in the morning. It was a rough area, the kind of neighborhood that had seen better days decades ago and never recovered. Boarded up buildings, empty storefronts, people standing on corners, even at this early hour, looking lost or waiting for something that probably wasn't coming. This was where my sister had been living. If it was really her. Robert found Chartiers Avenue and drove slowly until we spotted the shelter. It was a low brick building with barred windows and a faded sign that read, Sister Mary House of Mercy. The kind of place that served people who'd fallen through every other crack in the system. People with nowhere else to go. We sat in the car for a moment, neither of us moving. Are you ready? Robert asked. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for this, but I nodded anyway. I asked her one more question on that phone call. One question that would either prove this was real or confirm it was an elaborate hoax. Sharon had a scar. A small scar on her left knee from when she fell off her bike when she was 9 years old. She'd needed 6 stitches. It was shaped like a crescent moon, thin and white and barely visible unless you knew to look for it. I'd asked the woman on the phone, do you have any scars? Any old injuries you remember? And she'd gone quiet for a long moment. Then she'd said, I have a lot of scars. I don't know where most of them came from, but there's one on my left knee. It's old, really old, shaped, kind of like a curved line. I've always wondered about it. That's when I knew I had to see her in person. That's when I knew this might actually be real. Before I walked into that shelter, before I saw the woman who claimed to be Sharon, I needed to remember that night clearly. December 18th, 1983. Sharon was 21 years old. I was 25. We'd grown up in a small house in Brookline, just outside Pittsburgh. Our father had left when we were kids, so it was just the 3 of us. Me, Sharon, and Mom. Sharon was the bright one in our family, the dreamer. She wanted to be a teacher. She was in her senior year at Duquesne University, studying elementary education. She had a boyfriend named Michael Torres. They'd been dating for 2 years and were talking about getting engaged after graduation. That December night, she'd gone to a Christmas party with her college friends at an apartment in Oakland. She called me around 10 o'clock. Ella, she said, I'm heading home now. The roads are getting bad. Be careful, I told her. Drive slow. I will, she said. Love you. Love you too, Shari. Those were the last words I ever heard her say. Or at least, that's what I believed for 42 years. At 11:43 that night, 2 state troopers knocked on our door. I remember the exact time because I looked at the clock on the wall when I heard the knocking, and something in my stomach already knew. You don't get police at your door at that hour unless something terrible has happened. There'd been an accident on the Pine Valley Bridge, they said. A car matching Sharon's description had gone through the guardrail. The driver was deceased. Mom collapsed right there in the doorway. I had to hold her up while the officers gave us the details. The car had hit black ice. The bridge was known for it, especially in winter. Sharon had skidded, lost control, broke through the old guardrail, and plunged 60 feet into the frozen Chartiers Creek below. The impact had been catastrophic. They'd pulled the car out around 10 that morning, about 10 hours after the accident. The creek wasn't deep, but it was freezing, and the car had landed upside down in the water. The driver had been trapped inside. They needed someone to come identify the body, they said. They were fairly certain based on the vehicle registration and personal effects, but they needed family confirmation. Mom couldn't do it. Our family doctor had to come over and sedate her. She was in no condition to see what they were going to show us. So the next morning, December 19th, I went to the Allegheny County morgue alone. I was 25 years old. I'd never seen a dead body before, never been inside a morgue. The attendant who met me was kind but direct. He warned me before we went in. "There's significant trauma to the face and upper body," he said. "The victim was in the water for several hours in freezing temperatures. There's swelling and discoloration. Are you sure you're prepared for this?" I wasn't prepared. How could anyone be prepared? But I nodded and said I could do it. Someone had to. He led me into a cold room that smelled like chemicals and something else I couldn't identify. There was a body on a table covered with a white sheet. He asked me one more time if I was ready. I said yes. He pulled back the sheet. The face was damaged, swollen. There was bruising across the cheeks and forehead, a deep cut above the left eyebrow. The skin had a grayish tint that didn't look human. The hair was wet and matted, dark brown, shoulder length. I looked at the hair first because I couldn't look at the face. It was the same length as Sharon's, the same color. Then I forced myself to look at the body. She was petite, maybe 5'4". Sharon's height, slender build. Sharon's build. She was wearing a dark blue winter coat that looked like the one Sharon had been wearing when she left for the party. Brown leather boots. Sharon's boots. The attendant pointed to personal effects on a nearby table. A purse. Sharon's wallet inside with her driver's license. Some makeup. A set of car keys. And then I saw the ring. On the body's left hand was a small silver ring with a turquoise stone. I'd bought that ring for Sharon's 18th birthday at a little shop in Squirrel Hill. She wore it every day. She said it was her favorite piece of jewelry. I stared at that ring for a long time. "That's Sharon's ring," I said out loud. The attendant nodded. "So this is your sister?" he asked. "Sharon Marie Callahan?" I looked at the face one more time. It didn't look like Sharon, but then again it didn't look like anyone. It looked like something terrible had happened to a person. The attendant had warned me. Trauma, swelling, hours in freezing water. Of course she wouldn't look like herself. "Yes," I said. "Yes, that's my sister. That's Sharon Marie Callahan." "Are you certain?" he asked. "I'm certain," I said. They asked me to sign paperwork confirming the identification. I signed it. Sharon Marie Callahan, deceased. Identified by her sister, Ella Catherine Callahan. December 19th, 1983. I went home and told Mom. She screamed. She screamed so loud the neighbors came over. We made funeral arrangements. We picked out a casket. The funeral director gently suggested a closed casket service given the condition of the body. We agreed. We held the funeral on December 23rd at St. Benedict's Church, 2 days before Christmas. The church was full. Sharon's college friends. Her professors. Michael was there, crying in the front pew. Mom wore black and held my hand so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. We buried her at Mount Lebanon Cemetery on a gray, cold afternoon. The ground was frozen. I remember thinking how cold Sharon must be down there. We had a headstone made, Sharon Marie Callahan, beloved daughter and sister. 1962 to 1983. Gone too soon, but never forgotten. And then we tried to move forward with our lives. Mom never really recovered. She visited the grave every week, sometimes twice a week. She'd sit there and talk to Sharon like she was still alive. Every December 18th, the anniversary of the accident, Mom would spend the entire day at the cemetery. She died in 2010, 27 years after Sharon. The doctor said it was heart failure, but I knew better. She died of grief, a broken heart that never healed. I moved on better than Mom did, or at least I thought I did. I got married to Robert in 1984. We had Jennifer in 1986. I built a life. But there was always a part of me that stayed in that morgue on December 19th, 1983. A part of me that never left Sharon behind. I visited her grave less frequently than Mom, maybe 4 times a year. Birthday, death anniversary, Christmas, Mother's Day, after Mom died. I'd bring flowers and tell her about my life, about Jennifer, about Robert, about everything she was missing. But what if I'd been wrong? What if the person in that grave wasn't Sharon at all? What if I'd been so overwhelmed by shock and grief that I'd identified the wrong body? The thought had never occurred to me in 42 years. Never. The evidence had been so clear: the car, the purse, the wallet, the ring, the physical description matched. Why would I question it? But now, sitting in the car outside the Sister Mary shelter, I was questioning everything, because a woman had called me at 2:47 inches the morning and known things only Sharon could know. She knew about the yellow kitchen. She knew about the hair braiding and the humming. She knew about the birthmark shaped like a bean. She knew about the scar on her left knee. How could a stranger know those things? How could anyone know those things unless they were Sharon? If this woman really was my sister, then I'd made a mistake that destroyed her life. She'd been alive all this time. Alive and lost. While I identified someone else's body, while we buried a stranger, while Mom grieved for 27 years and died thinking her daughter was gone, while I celebrated birthdays and anniversaries and holidays, while I watched my own daughter grow up, Sharon had been out there somewhere, suffering, confused, not knowing who she was or where she belonged. The guilt was already crushing me, and I hadn't even confirmed if it was true yet. Robert turned off the car engine. We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us staring at the shelter. "Are you ready?" he asked again. I took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. We got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. It was time to find out if my sister had come back from the dead. The front door of the Sister Mary shelter was locked, but there was a buzzer. I pressed it and waited. A woman in her 50s answered, looking tired in the way people who work night shifts always do. She had kind eyes despite the exhaustion. "Can I help you?" she asked. "We're looking for someone," I said, and my voice was shaking. "Her name is Sharon. She might not remember her full name, but she called me early this morning." "She would have used your phone around 2:45. The woman studied me for a long moment, and I could see her making calculations in her head, deciding whether to trust us. Then her expression softened. "You're her sister," she said. It wasn't a question. "She told me someone might come. Said she'd found her family after all these years. Come in." She unlocked the door and led us into a narrow hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. The walls were painted a pale green that had probably been cheerful once, but now just looked worn. "My name's Patricia," the woman said. "I've been working here for 12 years. Sharon's been coming here on and off for about 8 of those years. She's a sweet lady. Quiet. Keeps to herself mostly. Never caused any trouble. Never asked for much. Just a bed and a meal when she needed it." "Does she remember anything?" I asked. "About her past? About who she was?" Patricia shook her head slowly. "Not until yesterday. She found an old newspaper someone had brought in for recycling. There was an article about an accident from 1983. She saw the photo and just broke down. Started crying and couldn't stop. Said that was her face. Said she knew it was her even though she looked so different now." Patricia led us down the hallway toward a door at the end. "She's been in the common room all night," Patricia said. "Wouldn't go to bed. Said she was afraid if she fell asleep, this would all turn out to be a dream. Afraid you wouldn't really come." My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "What does she look like?" I asked. I needed to prepare myself. Patricia paused with her hand on the door handle. "She's been through a lot," she said carefully. "The streets are hard on people, especially women alone for a long time. She looks older than she probably is, but she has kind eyes. You'll see that right away." Then Patricia opened the door. The common room was larger than I expected, folding tables and plastic chairs scattered around. A television mounted on the wall playing the morning news with no sound. A few people sitting in corners, nursing cups of coffee, not talking to each other. And there, sitting alone at a table near the window, was a woman with gray hair. She had her back to us, but I could see her shoulders were thin under a donated coat that was too big for her. Her hair was pulled back in a braid, and something about that braid made my chest hurt. She was staring down at something on the table in front of her. A piece of newspaper. Patricia touched my arm gently. "That's her," she whispered. "Take your time." Then she stepped back, giving us space. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. Robert's hand was on my back, steadying me. "You can do this," he said quietly. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. The woman didn't turn around. She was so focused on the newspaper that she didn't hear us approach. I could see now that it was an old article, yellowed with age. And there was a photo. Even from several feet away, I could see it was a photo of a young woman. "Sharon," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper, but she heard it. She went completely still. Then, slowly, she turned around. The face that looked at me was nothing like the face I remembered. This woman was weathered in a way that spoke of years of hardship. Her skin was lined deeply, especially around her eyes and mouth. Her cheeks were hollow. There were scars I could see even from a distance, one across her left cheekbone, another on her chin. Her hands, resting on the table, were rough and scarred too. She looked 70, not 63. But the eyes were exactly the same, green with flecks of gold, exactly like our father's eyes, exactly like Sharon's eyes. And when those eyes met mine, they filled with tears. "Ella," she whispered. It came out like a prayer, like she'd been saying that name in her head for so long and finally had permission to say it out loud. I crossed the room without thinking. Just moved toward her like something was pulling me. She stood up slowly, unsteadily, like her legs weren't quite reliable. We stood there facing each other across 3 feet of worn linoleum floor. I was looking for Sharon in this stranger's face, looking for my baby sister in this woman who'd been carved down to nothing by life. And then I saw it. The way she tilted her head slightly to the left when she was uncertain. Sharon used to do that. The way her right hand came up to touch her collarbone, fingers pressing against the bone. Sharon used to do that when she was nervous. The way she bit her lower lip. That was Sharon. That was my sister. "You came," she said, and her voice broke. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure this was real. I wasn't sure I was real." I reached out and took her hand. It was shaking. Or maybe my hand was shaking. Probably both. Her skin was rough and cold. I turned her hand over and looked at the palm. There were calluses there, old ones and new ones. The hands of someone who'd worked hard for a long time. But there, on the inside of her wrist, was a small scar. Sharon had gotten that scar when she was 14, reaching into a cabinet and cutting herself on a broken glass. I remembered because I'd been the one to bandage it. I remembered because I'd felt guilty for days, thinking I should have noticed the broken glass and cleaned it up before she got hurt. "Show me your shoulder," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. She hesitated, looking around the common room. There were other people there, not many, but some. "Not here," she said quietly. "There's a smaller room," Patricia showed me. "We can go there." She led us to a small side room that looked like it was used for private meetings or counseling sessions. Just a table and a few chairs. Robert waited outside, giving us privacy. Sharon closed the door, and then, with shaking hands, she pulled down the collar of her shirt and turned so I could see her right shoulder blade. There it was. The birthmark. Shaped like a small bean or a curved comma. Exactly where it had always been. I reached out and touched it with my fingertips. "Mom used to kiss this," I said. "When you were little. She called it your angel kiss. Said it was where your guardian angel had touched you before you were born." Sharon's shoulders started shaking. She was crying, silent tears running down her face. "I remember that," she whispered. "I didn't remember it before, but I remember it now. I can hear her saying it. I can feel her kissing my shoulder. Oh God, I can remember." I pulled her into my arms then. This woman who was a stranger and my sister all at once. She felt so fragile, like she might break if I held her too tight, but she held on to me like I was the only solid thing in the world. We stood there for a long time, both of us crying. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry I don't remember everything. I'm sorry I'm not who you remember. I'm sorry I disappeared." "Shh," I said. "You don't have anything to be sorry for. Nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing." But even as I said it, I was thinking about all the questions that needed answers. How did she survive the crash? Where had she been for 42 years? What happened to her? And most importantly, if this was Sharon, then who did I identify in the morgue that December morning in 1983? Who had we buried under my sister's name? The 3-hour drive to Pittsburgh had been the longest 3 hours of my life because I'd had to prepare myself for two possibilities. Either this was the cruelest scam anyone had ever pulled on me, or my sister had been alive all this time and I'd failed her. Now, holding her in that small room at the Sister Mary shelter, I knew which possibility was true. This was Sharon. Against all logic, against everything I thought I knew, this was my sister. And that meant everything I'd believed for 42 years was wrong. It meant I'd made a mistake that had cost Sharon her entire life. It meant someone else was in that grave. And it meant I needed to find out what really happened on December 18th, 1983. We sat in that small room for another 20 minutes before I could think clearly enough to do what needed to be done next. Sharon sat across from me, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that Patricia had brought in. She kept looking at me like she was afraid I'd disappear, like I was the dream that might evaporate. "I need to make some calls," I told her. "I need to tell people. Is that okay?" She nodded but didn't speak. I stepped out into the hallway where Robert was waiting. He took one look at my face and knew. "It's really her," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I pulled out my phone and called Jennifer. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm in Pittsburgh," I said. "At a shelter in McKees Rocks. And Jen, you need to sit down for this." I heard her moving. Heard a chair scrape. "Okay. I'm sitting." "What's going on?" "Your Aunt Sharon is alive," I said. The words sounded insane even as I said them. There was silence on the other end. Then Jennifer said, very carefully, "Mom, Aunt Sharon died before I was born, in 1983. You've told me about her my whole life." "I know," I said. "I know that's what we thought, but I'm looking at her right now. I've confirmed the birthmark, the scar on her knee, things only Sharon would know. We'll do a DNA test to be absolutely certain. But Jen, this is your aunt. She's alive." More silence. Then, "Mom, I think you need to come home. I think you're in shock. I think someone is taking advantage of you." "Jennifer," I said, and my voice was firmer now. "I know how this sounds. I know it seems impossible. But I need you to trust me. I need you to get on a plane and come to Pittsburgh. Today if you can, because this is real, and I need you here." I heard her take a shaky breath. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom. I'll be on the next flight out. I'll text you when I land." "Thank you," I said. "And Jen, don't tell anyone yet. Not until we know more. Not until we understand what happened." "Understood," she said. "I love you, Mom. Be careful. I love you too." I hung up and leaned against the wall. Robert put his arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm not even close to okay." Because if Sharon was alive, that meant everything we'd believed was a lie. It meant the person we buried wasn't Sharon. It meant someone else's family had been looking for their daughter while we mourned ours. It meant Mom had spent 27 years grieving at the wrong grave, had died thinking Sharon was gone when she wasn't. That thought was almost unbearable. I thought about all those Decembers. Mom sitting at the cemetery in the cold, talking to a headstone, telling Sharon about her day, about me, about Jennifer when she was born, saying how much she missed her, how life wasn't the same without her. Every single year on December 18th, the anniversary of the accident. Every year on Sharon's birthday, June 3rd. Every Christmas, every Easter, every Mother's Day. Mom had been talking to a stranger's grave. And Sharon had been alive somewhere, lost and alone, not knowing who she was or that anyone was looking for her. The guilt was crushing. I'd been the one to identify the body. I'd been the one to say, yes, that's Sharon. I'd been so sure. The ring had been on the body's finger. Sharon's ring. How had that happened? Had Sharon lost the ring before the accident? Had someone taken it from her? Nothing made sense. I went back into the room where Sharon was waiting. She looked up when I came in, those green eyes searching my face. My daughter is coming, I told her. Your niece, Jennifer. She'll be here this afternoon. She wants to meet you. Sharon's eyes filled with tears again. I have a niece, she said softly, like she was testing the words. You have a niece, I confirmed. She's 38 years old. She's a teacher, actually. Elementary school, like you wanted to be. She has 2 kids of her own. You have a great niece and a great nephew. Sharon put her hand over her mouth. A family, she whispered. I have a family. Yes, I said, you have a family, and we're going to figure this out together. But I need you to tell me everything you remember. Everything. Even if it doesn't make sense. Even if it's just fragments. Can you do that? She nodded and took a shaky breath. I'll try, she said. But there's not much. It's like my life is a book with most of the pages torn out. I only have a few paragraphs here and there. Start with your first clear memory, I said, sitting down across from her. What's the earliest thing you can remember with any certainty? She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. Waking up in a hospital, she said finally. I don't know what hospital, I don't know what city. But I remember a nurse leaning over me. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was asking me my name, and I couldn't answer because I didn't know. I didn't know my name. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I'd gotten there. Do you remember what year that was? I asked. She shook her head. They told me later it was 2003, February 2003, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't even know what year it was. 20 years, I said. The accident was in 1983. Your first clear memory is from 2003. That's 20 years unaccounted for. She nodded slowly. I know, and I've tried so hard to remember. I've spent years trying to pull something up from before that hospital, but there's nothing solid, just feelings, just nightmares. Tell me about the nightmares, I said. She wrapped her hands tighter around the coffee cup. I dream about being cold, she said. So cold I think I'm going to die. I dream about water, dark water closing over my head. I dream about screaming but no sound coming out. And I dream about men's voices, angry voices, telling me to shut up, telling me to work, telling me I'm worthless. Those dreams make me wake up shaking. My chest felt tight. What else? I asked gently. Do you have any other fragments? Any other pieces? Sometimes I remember places, she said. Not clearly, but impressions. A basement with a concrete floor, woods, thick woods, mountains maybe, a room with no windows, a truck bed, riding in the back of a truck with other people. But I don't know if these are real memories or if my mind is making things up to fill the gaps. What about after the hospital in 2003? I asked. What happened then? They kept me for a few days, she said. Ran tests, checked for head injuries. They said I had old fractures that had healed badly. Ribs, my left arm, my collarbone. They asked me if I remembered how I got those injuries. I didn't. They gave me a psychological evaluation. Said I had severe dissociative amnesia. Said it was likely caused by trauma. They asked if I'd been abused. I couldn't answer because I didn't remember. What did they do with you when they released you? I asked. She looked down at her hands. They contacted social services, tried to figure out who I was, took my fingerprints, but they didn't match anything in the system. Took my photo, compared it to missing persons reports, but nothing came up. After a few weeks, they gave up. Released me to a homeless shelter, gave me a generic name for the paperwork, Jane Doe. That's what I was called for years, Jane. And you've been homeless since then, I asked. On and off, she said. Sometimes I'd get a job, cleaning offices at night, working in kitchens, washing dishes, places that paid cash and didn't ask for ID. I'd save up enough to rent a room somewhere, but I could never keep it together long enough to stay. I'd have episodes, blackouts, I'd lose time. Days would pass, and I wouldn't know where I'd been or what I'd done. The shelters became the most stable thing in my life, she continued. Places like this one. They didn't ask questions. They just gave you a bed and a meal. Patricia has been kind to me. She knows I'm not like some of the others. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. I'm just lost. How did you find the newspaper? I asked. The one with the article about the accident. She smiled slightly, the first smile I'd seen from her. It was an accident, she said. Ironic, right? Patricia was cleaning out a storage room yesterday. They had boxes of old newspapers that someone had donated years ago. She was going through them, deciding what to keep for the recycling bin. She pulled out one from December 1983 and said, "Can you believe this was over 40 years ago?" And she showed me the front page. There was an article about a bus accident, and below that, a smaller article about a car accident on the Pine Valley Bridge. I looked at the article, Sharon continued, and something felt wrong, like a bell ringing in my head that I couldn't quite hear. Then I saw the photo. It was a grid of photos, victims of the accident, and one of them was me. I knew it was me, even though I looked so different now. The eyes were the same, and something in my chest just cracked open. I started crying and couldn't stop. Patricia thought I was having a breakdown. She almost called for medical help, but I managed to tell her, "That's me. That's my face. My name is Sharon Marie Callahan, and I'm supposed to be dead." Patricia helped me search online, Sharon said. We found more articles, found the obituary, found your name listed as the surviving family member. It took me all day to work up the courage to call you. I was so afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid you'd hang up, afraid this was all in my head, and I was finally going crazy after all these years. "But you called anyway," I said. She nodded. I had to know. I had to know if this was real. If I was real. If I had a life before all of this. "You are real," I said firmly. "You're Sharon Marie Callahan. You're my sister. You're 63 years old, not whatever age you feel. You had a life. You had a family. You have a family, and we're going to figure out what happened to you." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Sharon, the body I identified in 1983, it was wearing your coat, your boots, your ring was on its finger. How did someone else end up with your things?" She looked at me with those haunted green eyes. "I don't know," she said. "I wish I could remember. I wish I could tell you what happened that night. But it's just darkness, just cold and water and screaming, and then nothing for 20 years. We're going to need to do a DNA test," I said, "to confirm beyond any doubt. And we're going to need to talk to the police, because if you survived that accident, then someone else died. And someone needs to answer for what happened to you in those missing years." She looked frightened at the mention of police. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked. "What if they think I'm lying? What if they think I did something wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You're a victim. Of the accident, of whatever happened after, of 20 years of being lost. None of this is your fault. But we need answers. We need to know who was in that car. We need to know where you were. We need to know who hurt you." She nodded slowly, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of the truth. Fear of what we might uncover. And honestly, I was afraid too, because something terrible had happened to my sister. Something so terrible, her mind had locked it away for decades. And we were about to open that door. We couldn't stay at the shelter much longer. Other residents needed the space, and Sharon needed privacy to process everything that was happening. I asked Patricia if there was somewhere nearby where we could take Sharon, somewhere quiet where we could talk. Patricia suggested a diner 3 blocks away. "It's cheap, and they don't rush you out," she said. "Sharon goes there sometimes when she has a few dollars." Sharon gathered her things, which took all of 30 seconds because she barely had anything. A small backpack with a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a few personal items, that was it. 42 years of life reduced to what could fit in a child's backpack. She pulled on the donated coat and followed us out to the car. Robert opened the back door for her, and she hesitated before getting in. Like she wasn't sure she was allowed, like she thought this might be a trick. The diner was called Rosie's, and it had seen better decades. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the tiers, laminate tables, fluorescent lights that hummed. But it was warm and relatively clean, and the waitress who came over didn't look twice at Sharon's worn clothing. "What can I get you folks?" she asked. Sharon stared at the menu like she couldn't process the words. "When was the last time you ate?" I asked her gently. "Yesterday morning," she said. "Toast at the shelter. I ordered her a full breakfast. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, orange juice, coffee." She protested. "That's too much," she said. "That's expensive." "It's fine," I said. "Please eat." When the food came, she ate slowly, carefully, like she was afraid it might be taken away. I watched her and tried not to cry. This was my sister. This was Sharon, who used to eat like a horse and never gain a pound. Sharon, who would steal bacon off my plate and laugh when I protested. While she ate, I made calls. First to a DNA testing facility in Pittsburgh. I explained the situation, or at least an abbreviated version. "We need a paternity test," I said, which wasn't quite accurate, but it was close enough. The woman on the phone said they could see us that afternoon. They'd need cheek swabs from both of us, and the results would take 3 to 5 days. I booked the appointment for 2 o'clock. Then I called a lawyer I knew in Columbus, a family friend who specialized in estate law. "Michael," I said when he answered, "I need your help with something complicated." I gave him the broad strokes. "My sister, who we thought died in 1983, is alive. We're going to need to sort out legal identity, death certificates, all of it." He was quiet for a long moment. "Ella," he finally said, "are you sure about this? Are you absolutely certain this person is your sister?" "I'm certain enough to pursue it," I told him. "We're doing a DNA test this afternoon, but assuming it confirms what I already know, what do we need to do legally?" He sighed. "It's complicated," he said. "You'll need to petition the court to void the death certificate. You'll need to establish her identity. If she's been living under another name or no name at all, that creates additional issues. And then there's the matter of the person who was actually buried. If it wasn't Sharon, then who was it? You'll need to notify the authorities. This could become a criminal investigation." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you. I need someone who can help us navigate this." He agreed to start researching the legal requirements and said he'd call me back with more information. When I hung up, Sharon was watching me with wide eyes. "This is really happening," she said. "It isn't a dream. It's really happening," I confirmed. Jennifer's flight was supposed to land at noon. I texted her the name of the diner and told her to meet us there. Then I sat back in the booth and really looked at Sharon in the daylight coming through the diner windows. She was so thin. Her cheekbones stood out sharply. Her hands trembled slightly even when she wasn't holding anything. There were scars I hadn't noticed before, one across the back of her left hand, another on her forearm, small, round scars on her fingers that looked like burns. "What happened to you?" I asked quietly. "Where were you all those years?" She shook her head. "I wish I could tell you," she said. "I wish I could remember. But it's like there's a wall in my mind. I can feel that there's something behind it, something terrible, but I can't see it. Every time I try to push through, I get this crushing anxiety. My therapist at the free clinic said it's my brain protecting me." "You've been seeing a therapist?" I asked. She nodded. "For about a year now. The clinic offers free mental health services. My therapist, Dr. Chen. She's been helping me with the PTSD and anxiety. She's the one who suggested that my amnesia might be dissociative, that my mind shut down to protect me from trauma." "What kind of trauma?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Sharon was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I have scars that didn't come from an accident. I have nightmares about being hit, about being locked in dark places, about men who hurt me. But I don't have concrete memories, just feelings, just fear." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're safe now," I said. "Whatever happened, it's over. You're with family now." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Trauma doesn't just end because you're in a safe place. The scars, physical and mental, were still there. Robert had been quiet through most of this, but now he spoke up. Sharon, he said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to think practically. Do you have any identification at all? Do you have a social security number? A birth certificate? Anything? She shook her head. Nothing. When I woke up in that hospital in 2003, I was Jane Doe. I've been Jane Doe ever since. Some shelters gave me a client number, some places made up a birth date for their paperwork. But I have no legal identity. How have you survived? I asked. How did you get medical care or assistance? She smiled sadly. You learn to work around the system, she said. Free clinics that don't ask for ID, churches that give out food without paperwork, shelters that only need a name, any name. You work jobs that pay cash under the table, you become invisible, and that's what I've been for 20 years. Invisible? Jennifer arrived just after noon. I saw her through the diner window, paying a taxi driver, and my heart swelled. She looked so much like me at that age. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, determined expression. She came into the diner and spotted us immediately. Her eyes went from me to Robert to Sharon, and I saw her trying to process what she was seeing. She walked over slowly and slid into the booth next to me. Mom, she said. Then she looked at Sharon. Aunt Sharon? Sharon's eyes filled with tears again. You look like Ella, she said. You look like your mother when she was young. Jennifer studied Sharon's face. I can see it, she said finally. I can see the resemblance to the photos Grandma had, the eyes especially. Jennifer was being cautious, which I understood. She was protective of me, worried this was a scam. But she was also open, willing to see the truth if it was there. We're going for a DNA test at 2, I told Jennifer. That will give us definitive proof. In the meantime, Sharon needs clothes, toiletries, a place to stay that isn't a shelter. Jennifer nodded and pulled out her phone. I'll book a hotel room, she said. Something comfortable. And we can go shopping this afternoon after the DNA test. Sharon looked overwhelmed. I don't have money for any of that, she said. You don't need money, I told her firmly. You're family. We take care of family. But I could see the discomfort in her eyes. She'd been on her own for so long, depending on charity and her own resourcefulness. Accepting help from family, from people who were essentially strangers to her now, was difficult. It's okay to let us help you, Jennifer said gently. It's okay to not be alone anymore. Sharon nodded, but didn't look convinced. The DNA testing facility was in a medical building downtown. We arrived early and sat in the waiting room, filling out paperwork. Sharon struggled with the forms. Date of birth? They asked. June 3rd, 1962, I told her. Previous address. I gave them our childhood home in Brookline, even though that house had been sold decades ago. Medical history. Sharon left most of it blank because she didn't know. The technician who called us back was professional and efficient. She explained the process, took cheek swabs from both of us, labeled the samples. The results would be ready in 3 to 5 business days. We'd receive them by email and phone. Is there anything else you need? She asked. Yes, I said. Is there any way to expedite this? It's an unusual situation. She looked at her computer. For an additional fee, we can have preliminary results in 48 hours. I paid the fee without hesitation. We left the facility, and Jennifer drove us to a Target. She and Sharon went through the women's section, while I sat on a bench and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. My phone rang. It was Michael, the lawyer. Ella, he said, I've been doing some research. This situation is more complex than I initially thought. If Sharon was declared legally dead in 1983, reversing that will require a court order. You'll need to provide evidence of her identity. The DNA test will help, but you'll also need supporting documentation. The problem is, all of her original documents, birth certificate, social security card, they're probably listed as belonging to a deceased person. We'll essentially have to resurrect her legally. And then there's the question of the body in the grave. I took a deep breath. What do we do about that? You'll need to contact the police, he said. If someone else is buried under Sharon's name, that's a wrongful identification at minimum. And depending on what happened, it could be evidence of a crime. I understand, I said. Can you recommend someone? A detective or investigator who could handle this sensitively? He gave me the name of a retired detective who now worked as a private investigator. Carol Hayes. She's discreet and thorough, Michael said. Tell her I referred you. I called Carol immediately and explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. This is extraordinary, she finally said. If it's true, if your sister really survived, then we need to figure out what happened that night in 1983. And more importantly, we need to figure out where she's been for the last 42 years. Can you help us? I asked. I can try, she said. But I need to be honest with you. The trail is 42 years cold. Memories fade. Evidence disappears. People die. This won't be easy. I don't care, I said. I need to know what happened to my sister. All right, Carol said. I'll start by pulling the accident reports from 1983. I'll also look into missing persons reports from that time period. If someone else died in that crash, someone was probably looking for them. When Jennifer and Sharon emerged from the store, Sharon was carrying 2 bags of clothes and looked uncomfortable about it. This is too much, she kept saying. It's not too much, Jennifer said firmly. It's the bare minimum. We got you a week's worth of clothes, underwear, pajamas, a coat that actually fits, shoes that don't have holes. That's not extravagant. That's basic. We went to the hotel next. Jennifer had booked 2 rooms, one for her and Sharon, one for me and Robert. I could see the relief in Sharon's eyes when she realized she'd have her own bed, her own bathroom, privacy and safety. She stood in the middle of the hotel room like she didn't know what to do with herself. When was the last time you slept in a real bed? Jennifer asked. Sharon thought about it. I don't know, she said. Years. The shelters have cots or mats on the floor. Before that, I honestly can't remember. You can sleep here as long as you need to, Jennifer said. And after the DNA results come back, we'll figure out something more permanent. That evening, we ordered room service. Sharon ate pizza and kept looking around like she expected someone to tell her this wasn't allowed. We watched television together, something mindless and easy. Sharon fell asleep on the couch halfway through, exhausted from the emotional weight of the day. Jennifer and I covered her with a blanket and moved to the adjoining room to talk. Mom, Jennifer said quietly, what if the DNA test doesn't match? What if this isn't really Aunt Sharon? Then we'll deal with that, I said. But Jen, I know it's her. I know it in my bones. I can see Sharon in her face. I can hear Sharon in her voice. The mannerisms, the way she tilts her head, the way she touches her collarbone when she's nervous. That's Sharon. Jennifer nodded slowly. I can see it too, she admitted. And if it is her, if the DNA confirms it, what then? Then we help her rebuild her life, I said. We help her recover her identity. We help her heal. And we find out what happened to her. The next day, Carol Hayes called. She'd pulled the accident report from December 18th, 1983. I'm sending you a copy, she said. But I want to prepare you. There are some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked. For one, the report notes that the victim was wearing a ring, a silver ring with a turquoise stone. That's how you identified the body, correct? Yes, I said. That was Sharon's ring. I gave it to her for her 18th birthday. Here's the thing, Carol said. The ring wasn't found on the body initially. It was found in the car during the recovery and later placed with the personal effects. Someone assumed it belonged to the driver and it was used as part of the identification. But if Sharon survived and got out of the car, she might have left the ring behind or lost it in the chaos. My heart was pounding. What else? The report also notes that there was significant damage to the passenger side of the vehicle, Carol continued. Not just from the impact, but damage that suggests there might have been a passenger. Glass on the passenger seat. The passenger door was found open, but no second body was recovered. They assumed the door had been forced open during the crash. But what if there was a passenger? What if that passenger was the one who died? I felt sick. You're saying the person I identified might have been a passenger in Sharon's car? It's possible, Carol said. I'm going to look into missing persons reports from that time period. Young women, early 20s, who disappeared around mid-December 1983 inches the Pittsburgh area. If someone else died in that crash, someone was probably looking for them. Let me know what you find, I said. The DNA results came back in 48 hours, just as promised. I was in the hotel room with Sharon when my phone rang. The technician's voice was professional, but I could hear the surprise in it. "Miss Callahan?" she said. "I have your results. The probability of siblingship between you and the subject is 99.98%. You are biological sisters." I looked at Sharon. She was watching me with those green and gold eyes, holding her breath. "It's official," I said. "You're Sharon Marie Callahan. You're my sister." She started crying. So did I. Jennifer hugged both of us. Robert stood back with tears in his eyes. After 42 years of believing my sister was dead, after 42 years of grief and guilt and unanswered questions, I had her back. But that joy was complicated by the growing realization that something terrible had happened, something that had stolen 42 years of Sharon's life, something that had left another woman dead and buried under the wrong name. And we were about to uncover exactly what that something was. Carol Hayes called me the next morning with information that changed everything. "I found something," she said. On December 17th, 1983, the night before Sharon's accident, a young woman named Rebecca Thompson was reported missing from Ohio State University. She was 22 years old, driving home to Pittsburgh for Christmas break. Her car was found abandoned on Route 22, about 15 miles from the Pine Valley Bridge. No sign of Rebecca. Her family searched for months, but she was never found. I sat down hard on the hotel bed. "You think Rebecca Thompson was in Sharon's car?" "I think it's possible," Carol said. "The timeline fits. Rebecca's car breaks down. It's cold, snowing. Someone offers her a ride. Maybe that someone was Sharon. They're heading in the same direction. Two young women, similar age, similar build. And then the accident happens. But how did Rebecca end up dead, and Sharon survived?" I asked. Carol was quiet for a moment. "I've been looking at the accident scene photos," she said. "The car went through the guardrail and down the embankment, but it didn't go directly into the water. It hit trees on the way down. The passenger side took the worst of the impact. If Rebecca was in the passenger seat, she would have taken the full force. Sharon, as the driver, might have been thrown from the vehicle or managed to crawl out before it hit the water. But if Sharon survived, where did she go?" I asked. "Why didn't she get help?" "That's where this gets darker," Carol said. "I've been researching missing persons cases from that area in the 1980 seconds. There are several reports of young women disappearing along that stretch of highway. And there are rumors, never proven, about labor trafficking operations in the rural areas north of Pittsburgh. Groups that would take people with no identification, no family looking for them, and use them for forced labor." "You think Sharon was taken?" I said. It wasn't a question. "I think she was injured, disoriented, possibly suffering from hypothermia and head trauma," Carol said. "Someone found her on that road. But instead of taking her to a hospital, they saw an opportunity. A young woman with no memory, no identification. No one would be looking for her because everyone thought she was dead. The perfect victim." My stomach turned. "Where would they take her?" I asked. "Rural Pennsylvania has a lot of isolated areas," Carol said. "Farms, logging operations, illegal grow operations, places where people could be kept and forced to work without anyone knowing. The workers would be moved frequently to avoid detection. They'd be kept confused, dependent, afraid. Some operations used drugs to keep people compliant. Others used violence and isolation. I went to Sharon's room and found her sitting by the window, staring out at the Pittsburgh skyline. "Sharon?" I said gently. "I need to ask you something difficult." She turned to look at me. I could see she hadn't slept well. The beds at the hotel were too soft after years of shelter cots, she'd told me. "Carol, our investigator, thinks you might have been taken after the accident, kept somewhere against your will. Is there anything you remember that might help us understand what happened?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she started talking. her voice barely above a whisper. "I remember a barn," she said. "Or maybe several barns. They blur together, sleeping on hay, being cold all the time. My hands hurt from work. Milking cows, cleaning, carrying things. There were other people there. Women mostly. Some men. We didn't talk to each other. We weren't allowed." She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "I remember a man with a beard. He was in charge. He had a gun. He'd point it at us sometimes when we worked too slowly. There was a woman too, older. She'd bring us food once a day. Soup usually. Bread. Never enough. We weren't allowed to leave the barn except to work. There were locks on the doors. Dogs outside that would bark if anyone tried to run." "How long were you there?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Time didn't mean anything. Seasons changed. It was winter, then summer, then winter again. Over and over. Years maybe? Many years. Did anyone ever try to escape?" I asked. "Some did," she said. "They'd disappear in the night and we'd never see them again. The man with the beard would tell us they'd been caught, that bad things happened to people who ran. We believed him." "What about your injuries?" I asked gently. "The broken bones, the scars." Sharon touched her ribs unconsciously. "Punishments," she said simply. "If you worked too slowly. If you talked, if you looked at them wrong. The woman, the older one, she'd set bones sometimes, wrap ribs, basic medical care to keep us working. But never a real doctor, never a hospital." "How did you get away?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't remember clearly. I think I got sick, really sick, pneumonia maybe. I couldn't work. I was burning with fever, coughing up blood. I think they thought I was dying. The next thing I remember is waking up in that hospital in Pittsburgh in 2003. The nurse said someone had dropped me at the emergency room entrance and left. No identification, no explanation, just left me there to die or survive on my own. I called Carol immediately and relayed what Sharon had told me. "Jesus," Carol said. "This is human trafficking, labor trafficking specifically. We need to contact the FBI. They have a cold case unit that deals with trafficking from that era. But Ella, I need to warn you. If the people who did this are still alive, if the operation is still running in some form, this could be dangerous." "I don't care," I said. "They stole 20 years of my sister's life. They kept her prisoner. They need to answer for that." "I understand," Carol said. "But we need to be smart about this. Let me reach out to my contacts at the FBI. In the meantime, don't let Sharon go anywhere alone. If these people find out she's alive and remembering things, she could be in danger." That afternoon, 2 FBI agents came to the hotel. Special Agent Catherine Ross and Special Agent James Park. They were kind but thorough, recording everything Sharon could remember. They showed her maps of rural Pennsylvania, trying to narrow down where she might have been held. Sharon pointed to an area north of Pittsburgh, near the Allegheny National Forest. "Here," she said. "I remember mountains. I remember thick woods. I remember a road that curved like a snake." They took DNA samples from under Sharon's fingernails, even though it had been years. They photographed her scars, documenting each one. They asked about the other people she remembered. Did any of them ever say their names? Did she remember any identifying features? Sharon tried, but her memories were fragmented. A woman with red hair, a young man with a limp, an older woman who spoke Spanish. Fragments of people who might also be victims, might also be missing. Agent Ross pulled me aside while Agent Park continued interviewing Sharon. "Miss Callahan," she said, "what your sister is describing matches several operations we've been investigating from that time period. Labor trafficking rings that operated in rural Pennsylvania and West Virginia in the 1,980 seconds and 90 seconds. They targeted vulnerable people, homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, people with mental illness or memory issues, people who wouldn't be missed." "But Sharon would have been missed," I said. "We were looking for her." "That's the thing," Agent Ross said. "You weren't looking for her. You thought she was dead." As far as the world was concerned, Sharon Callahan died in a car accident in 1983. No one was searching for her. She was the perfect victim. A ghost. Someone who didn't exist anymore. We think the person you identified in the morgue was Rebecca Thompson, Agent Ross continued. We're working on getting an exhumation order to confirm with DNA testing. Rebecca's family has been notified. They're devastated but also relieved to finally have answers after 42 years. What about the people who did this? I asked. Can you find them? We're going to try, Agent Ross said, but I need to be honest. Many of the people involved in these operations are likely dead by now. It's been 42 years. Those who are still alive have had decades to cover their tracks. But we're not giving up. Your sister's testimony, fragmented as it is more than we've had before. Most victims from that era either died or never recovered their memories enough to talk about it. Sharon is rare. A survivor who lived to tell the story. That evening, Sharon and I sat together in her hotel room. She was exhausted from the FBI interview, but also seemed lighter somehow. Like sharing her story, even the pieces she could remember had lifted some weight off her shoulders. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. For what? I asked. For not dying, she said. That sounds terrible, but if I had died in that crash, you wouldn't be going through this. Mom wouldn't have buried the wrong person. That poor girl's family would have had closure. Everything would have been simpler. I took her hand. Don't you ever apologize for surviving? I said. You survived something horrible. You endured 20 years of captivity and another 20 years of being lost. You're the strongest person I know. And yes, this is complicated and painful, but you're alive. You're here. That's what matters. Sharon squeezed my hand. Do you think they'll find them? She asked. The people who did this to me? I don't know, I said honestly. But even if they don't, even if those people are gone, we know the truth now. We know you survived. We know you were taken. We know it wasn't your fault. And we know you're Sharon Marie Callahan, my sister, and you belong with us. What Sharon told me next would explain everything about how she'd survived those 20 years of captivity. The fragments she remembered painted a picture of systematic abuse, forced labor, and complete dehumanization. But they also revealed something else. The operation that had taken her wasn't a small, isolated crime. It was part of something much larger, a network that had operated for decades, destroying countless lives, and Sharon might be the key to finally exposing it all. 3 days after the DNA confirmation, Carol Hayes called with more disturbing information. I've been digging deeper into the accident reports, she said. The coroner's office in 1983 was overwhelmed that week. There was the bus accident that killed 12 people on December 16th. Your sister's accident on December 18th, and 3 other weather-related fatalities. The morgue was running beyond capacity. Files were mixed up, bodies were misidentified. It was chaos. I found something else. Rebecca Thompson's family had requested to see her body when she was first reported missing, but they were told no body had been recovered. Then, after Sharon's accident, they were told a body matching Rebecca's description had been found, but was too damaged for viewing. They never actually saw her. They accepted the authorities' word that their daughter was gone, just like we did. The FBI had taken over the investigation by this point. Agent Ross called me with an update that made everything clear. We've identified the trafficking ring, she said. It operated from 1979 to 2004 across rural Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and parts of Ohio. They targeted vulnerable individuals, especially women. The operation was run by a family named the Brennans. Thomas Brennan, his wife Margaret, and their 2 sons. They owned several farms in Armstrong County, about 40 miles north of Pittsburgh. They used forced labor for agricultural work, construction, cleaning. The victims were kept in converted barns, moved between properties to avoid detection. Some were kept for decades. Most never escaped. The ones who did were too traumatized or confused to report what had happened. Many had no memory of their identities, just like Sharon. What happened to the Brennans? I asked. Thomas died in 2008, Agent Ross said. Margaret died in 2011. One son died in a farming accident in 2005. The other son, William Brennan, is in a nursing home with advanced dementia. He's 78 years old. We can't prosecute him. He doesn't even remember his own name most days. But we did find records. Hidden in the barn walls at one of their properties, ledgers with dates, descriptions of workers. There's an entry from December 19th, 1983. Found girl on Pine Valley Road. Head injury, no identification, kept for labor. They didn't even give her a name, just called her number 27. Sharon was number 27 for 20 years. I had to sit down when Agent Ross told me that. My sister had been reduced to a number. For 20 years, she'd been property, a thing to be used for work until she couldn't work anymore. Then she'd been discarded like trash at a hospital emergency room. Agent Ross continued. We found evidence of at least 43 victims over the 25 years the operation ran. Some died in captivity. Some were sold to other operations. Some, like Sharon, were dumped when they became too sick or old to work. We're trying to identify all of them, but it's difficult. Many were undocumented immigrants or people who'd already been listed as deceased, like your sister. The Brennans specifically targeted people who wouldn't be missed or who were already considered dead. Carol Hayes had discovered something else. The reason Rebecca Thompson's body ended up in Sharon's car was simple and tragic. Rebecca hadn't just been a random passenger. She and Sharon had known each other. They were both students at Duquesne University. They were in the same education program. On December 17th, when Rebecca's car broke down, she'd called around looking for a ride. Sharon had offered to pick her up on her way home from the Christmas party. Two friends trying to help each other. And it had ended with one dead and one enslaved for 20 years. The cruelty of that coincidence was almost unbearable. If Sharon hadn't stopped to help Rebecca, she would have made it home safely. But that was who Sharon was. Always helping, always kind, and it had cost her everything. The DNA test had confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Sharon was my sister. The probability of siblingship was 99.98%, according to the laboratory report. It was mathematically certain. But the FBI wanted additional confirmation, so they arranged for a more comprehensive test. Mitochondrial DNA, which is passed from mother to child. Since Sharon and I had the same mother, our mitochondrial DNA should be identical. It was. They also compared Sharon's DNA to samples from Mom's hairbrush that I'd kept after she died. Perfect match. There was no doubt. The woman sitting in that hotel room was Sharon Marie Callahan, my sister. The girl we'd buried in 1983 was Rebecca Thompson. Her family was notified. After 42 years, they finally knew what had happened to their daughter. The exhumation order came through 2 weeks later. Rebecca Thompson's body was removed from the grave, marked with Sharon's name. Her family held a proper funeral in Ohio. They invited us to attend, but Sharon wasn't ready for that. She could barely process her own survival, let alone face the family of the woman who died in her car. I went alone. I met Rebecca's younger sister, now 60 years old. She thanked me for finding the truth. She said at least now they knew. After 4 decades of wondering, of hoping, of imagining terrible scenarios, they finally knew. Rebecca had died trying to get home for Christmas. She'd died instantly in the crash. She hadn't suffered. That was the only comfort anyone could offer. Meanwhile, the FBI had found more evidence at the Brennan properties. Graves. Unmarked graves containing the remains of victims who hadn't survived the captivity. Each one was someone's daughter, son, sister, brother. Each one had been reported missing or presumed dead. Each one had been forgotten by a world that had moved on without them. The investigation would take years, identifying remains, tracking down families, piecing together the full scope of the trafficking operation. Sharon was the key witness, the only survivor with clear memories of the Brennan farm, even if those memories were fragmented. She would have to testify eventually, when she was strong enough. But for now, she was focused on something simpler. Learning how to be Sharon again? Learning how to be my sister? Learning how to be part of a family after 42 years of being nobody? Dr. Patricia Chen, the trauma specialist at UPMC, spent 3 days evaluating Sharon. Her findings were comprehensive and heartbreaking. Sharon exhibits severe complex PTSD, Dr. Chen explained to us. Multiple traumas compounded over decades. The initial car accident caused a traumatic brain injury, then 20 years of captivity, forced labor, physical abuse, then another 20 years of homelessness, living in constant survival mode. Her brain has been in a state of hypervigilance for so long that it's forgotten how to feel safe. The dissociative amnesia is her mind's way of protecting her from memories too painful to process. Some memories may return with therapy. Others are likely gone forever, which might be a mercy. The physical examination revealed the full extent of Sharon's injuries. 7 broken ribs that had healed without proper medical attention. A fractured left orbital bone that had left her with slightly impaired vision. Damage to her lumbar spine from years of hard labor. Scars consistent with whipping. Burns that looked deliberate. Malnutrition had stunted her growth, which is why she appeared shorter than she'd been at 21. Her teeth showed decades of neglect. Her hands were permanently damaged from frostbite and overwork. "This isn't just trauma," Dr. Chen said. "This is torture. Systematic, prolonged torture designed to break a person's will." The fact that Sharon survived with any sense of self intact is miraculous. Dr. Chen's theory about what happened aligned with what the FBI had discovered. Sharon survived the initial crash, but suffered a severe concussion and hypothermia. The Brennans found her wandering on the road, confused and unable to remember who she was. They saw an opportunity. They took her to their farm and put her to work. The head injury made her compliant, unable to form new memories properly or understand what was happening to her. They kept her isolated, moved her frequently, used violence to maintain control. When she became too sick to work in 2003, probably with severe pneumonia, they dumped her at a hospital. They assumed she would die or remain a Jane Doe forever. They never imagined she would recover enough to remember fragments of her past. The psychological evaluation was equally sobering. Sharon's emotional development had essentially stopped at 21, Dr. Chen explained. Parts of her are still that young woman who got in a car in 1983. Other parts adapted to survive extreme circumstances. She has multiple traumatic memories that her brain has compartmentalized. In therapy, we'll work on integrating these parts, but it will take years. She may never fully recover all her memories or her previous personality. The Sharon you remember from 1983 is gone. The woman here now is someone new, forged by experiences we can barely imagine. But she's still your sister. The core of who she was remains. Her kindness, her gentleness, her capacity for love. Those things survived even when everything else was taken from her. We started Sharon in intensive therapy immediately, 3 times a week at first. EMDR for trauma processing, cognitive behavioral therapy for the PTSD, physical therapy for her injuries, occupational therapy to help her relearn basic life skills. She'd been in survival mode for so long that simple things like grocery shopping or paying bills were overwhelming. She didn't know how to use a computer. She'd never had a cell phone. The world had changed dramatically in the 42 years she'd been gone, and she had to learn it all from scratch. But she was determined. That was something that hadn't changed about Sharon. When she decided to do something, she did it with everything she had. The woman I'd thought was dead had been suffering all this time. While I'd gotten married, had Jennifer, built a career, celebrated countless holidays and milestones, Sharon had been trapped in a nightmare. While Mom had visited that grave every week, talking to someone who wasn't there, Sharon had been just 40 miles away, living as number 27 on a farm where human beings were treated as livestock. While we'd mourned and eventually moved forward with our lives, she'd been forgotten by everyone, including herself. The guilt was crushing. If I'd looked more carefully at that body in the morgue, if I'd questioned the identification, if I'd insisted on a second opinion. But Dr. Chen reminded me that guilt wouldn't help Sharon now. What she needed was support, patience, and the knowledge that she was finally safe. Finally home. Finally Sharon Marie Callahan, again, after 42 years of being nobody at all. That was 3 months ago. Sharon lives with us now in Columbus. She has the guest room, though she rarely sleeps through the night. I hear her sometimes at 3 in the morning, walking the halls like she's still looking for a way out, like she's still not sure the doors will open from the inside. Robert installed a nightlight in every room because she can't stand complete darkness. It reminds her of the barn, she said. The therapy is intensive, 3 times a week with Dr. Chen, via video call, plus a local trauma specialist twice a week. Some days are better than others. Tuesday, she remembered our mother's middle name. Wednesday, she couldn't remember how to use a can opener. The brain is mysterious in how it heals. Progress isn't linear. But there is progress. She's gaining weight. Her face doesn't look quite so hollow. She laughs sometimes, though it always seems to surprise her when it happens. Jennifer has been Sharon's anchor in ways I couldn't be. Maybe it's because Jennifer never knew her before, so she doesn't carry the weight of who Sharon used to be. She just accepts who Sharon is now. They go for walks together every morning, short ones at first, just around the block. Now they make it to the park and back. Sharon feeds the ducks there. She says they remind her of something good, though she can't remember what. Jennifer helped her get a state ID last week. Sharon Marie Callahan, it says, date of birth the 3rd of June 1962. The photo shows a woman who looks older than her years, but whose eyes are starting to show life again. She carried that ID around for 3 days, pulling it out every few hours to look at it. Proof that she exists. That she's real. That she's someone. We held a memorial service for Rebecca Thompson last month. Her family came from Ohio. Her sister, her nieces and nephews, people who'd spent 42 years wondering what happened to her. We met at the cemetery where she'd been buried under Sharon's name. The headstone has been changed now. Rebecca Ann Thompson. It reads, 1,961 to 1,983. Finally home. Sharon couldn't attend. It was too much. But she wrote a letter that I read aloud. Thank you for being my friend, it said. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I survived when you didn't. I hope you're at peace. Rebecca's sister hugged me afterward. She said knowing the truth, as painful as it was better than wondering. At least now they could properly grieve. At least now Rebecca could rest under her own name. The FBI investigation continues, though most leads have gone cold. The Brennan property was seized and searched thoroughly. They found remains of 7 other victims. 7 people who disappeared without a trace, whose families had searched and prayed and eventually given up. Each one is being identified through DNA testing. Each one will finally go home. William Brennan, the surviving son, died 2 weeks ago in the nursing home. He never regained enough awareness to be questioned. The secrets of what exactly happened on those farms died with him. But Sharon's testimony, fragmented as it is, has helped close several missing persons cases. She's given other families the answers they've been seeking for decades. That matters. Even if we never know everything that happened to her, her survival has brought truth to light. Sharon is learning to be in the world again. Last week, she went to the grocery store by herself for the first time. She was gone for 3 hours. I was about to go looking for her when she came home with 1 bag containing milk, bread, and 17 cans of soup. She'd gotten overwhelmed by all the choices, she said. Soup felt safe, simple. We ate soup for dinner every night that week, and she smiled each time like she'd accomplished something important. And she had. She's learning to use a computer. Jennifer is teaching her. Yesterday she sent her first email. It was to me, even though I was sitting in the next room. It said, "Hello, Ella. This is Sharon. I'm learning to type. Thank you for not giving up on me." I cried when I read it. Such a simple thing. An email. But for Sharon, it's a connection to a world she'd been locked out of for 42 years. She remembers more now. Not the dark years, thankfully. Those memories seem to be locked away, and Dr. Chen says they may never fully surface. The brain is protective that way. But she remembers before. Our childhood. Our mother's voice. The way Dad would let us stay up late on Saturday nights to watch movies. She remembered my wedding last week. Suddenly, in the middle of dinner, she said, "You wore Mom's dress. You had baby's breath in your hair, and I was your maid of honor. I wore pink. I hate pink, but I wore it for you." It was true. All of it. She'd complained about that pink dress for weeks before the wedding. The memory made her laugh, then cry, then laugh again. These moments of clarity come more frequently now. Pieces of Sharon emerging from the fog. Yesterday, we sat on the back porch watching the sunset. It's become our evening ritual. She looked at me with those green and gold eyes that are so much like our father's and said, "I'm sorry I don't remember everything yet. I'm sorry I'm not the sister you had. I'm different now. I know that." And I told her the truth. "You're exactly who you're supposed to be. You survived something impossible. You came back from the dead. You found your way home after 42 years. That's not different. That's miraculous. We have time now. We have the rest of our lives to make new memories. The old ones matter, but they're not everything." She smiled at that. It's still a rare thing, her smile, like something precious that needs to be protected. But it's getting more common. Every day, a little more common. I learned something through all of this that I need to share. Hope isn't foolish, even when it seems impossible. For 42 years, I believed my sister was dead. I visited her grave. I mourned her. I accepted her loss as an unchangeable fact. But she was alive, broken, lost, forgotten, but alive. The human mind is more resilient than we can imagine. Sharon's brain protected her by forgetting. It allowed her to survive 20 years of captivity by shutting down the memories that would have destroyed her. And when she was ready, when she was safe, it began to give those memories back. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to find her way home. Family isn't just about shared memories or blood or growing up in the same house. It's about showing up when it matters. It's about choosing to believe when everything seems impossible. It's about answering the phone at 2:47 inches the morning, even when you're afraid of what you might hear. Sharon is still finding herself. She may never remember everything. The 20 years she spent as number 27 on the Brennan farm may stay locked away forever, and maybe that's a mercy. She'll always carry the scars, physical and mental, of those lost years. Her hands will always be damaged. Her back will always hurt. She'll always be afraid of the dark and locked doors and men with beards. But she's here. She's alive. She's home. She's Sharon Marie Callahan. Not a number, not a ghost, not a stranger in someone else's grave. She's my sister. And that's everything. If you've experienced something similar, if you've lost someone or found someone you thought was lost, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have answered that 2 a.m. call? Would you have believed the impossible? Think about this. Right now, someone you've given up on might still be out there. Someone you've mourned might still be breathing. It's rare. I know. Most people who disappear don't come back. Most deaths are exactly what they seem. But sometimes, rarely, impossibly, the phone rings at 2:47 inches the morning, and the dead speak. If that ever happens to you, answer the call. Listen to the voice. Ask the questions that need asking. Because you never know who might be trying to find their way home. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you've lost, please share it. Share it because somewhere out there, another Sharon might be sitting in a shelter, holding an old newspaper, trying to remember who they are. Share it because another family might be mourning the wrong person. Share it because truth, even after 42 years, still matters. Thank you for listening to Sharon's story. Thank you for believing the impossible along with me. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Stories like this, stories that challenge everything we think we know about loss and memory and survival, they need to be told. They need to be heard. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next impossible story. And if you won't subscribe, tell me why in the comments. Tell me what would make you believe. Tell me what would make you answer that 2 a.m. call. Because I answered mine, and it brought my sister back from the dead.